I've seen it. I've read some of it, and it's fine.
They say economic impact is devastating.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
No, I don't believe it.
That's President Trump back in November dismissing a study done by his own administration that warned climate change will have devastating effects, including devastating effects on the economy. Well, now new polling indicates environmental issues connected to global warming are climbing on the list of voter concerns heading into the 2020 presidential election. Nearly 40% of registered voters polled by Yale and George Mason universities indicate it will be a crucial factor in determining how they cast their ballots. In recent days, we learned the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere is as bad as it was 3 million years ago, a reading of 415 parts per million. This video from Bill Nye caught fire this week.
By the end of this century, if emissions keep rising, the average temperature on Earth could go up another 4 to 8 degrees. What I'm saying is the planet's on fire. There are a lot of things we could do to put it out. Are any of them free? No, of course not. Nothing's free, you idiots. Grow the up. You're not children anymore. I didn't mind explaining photosynthesis to you when you were 12, but you're adults now, and this is an actual crisis. Got it?
Real talk from the Science Guy. Joining us now, David Wallace Wells. We swapped one New York Magazine writer for another. He's the author of Uninhabitable Earth, The Life After Warming. Let me start by asking you about a quote I read from Bill McKibben, who's been focused on climate issues for a very long time. He said, I'm going to paraphrase here, it's not a question of whether the candidates are going to talk about climate, but how. When you look at this moment and how this conversation is happening, what's your sense of how engaged the Democratic candidates are with the issue?
Amazingly engaged.
Yeah.
I would say much more so than even a few years ago. We know in the 2016 election, there were no questions during the debates about climate change. I think it'll be one of the 2 or 3 top issues. There's been polling that in Iowa in particular, it's already the top issue among Democratic voters, or tied for the top issue. That's remarkable. And all of the candidates who have rolled out climate plans have rolled out ever more ambitious ones. We're still waiting for a number of them to put forward real policy proposals, but from Beto to Inslee, and we'll go forward, we're going to be seeing an arms race to see who will be the most serious, who will be the most ambitious. And I think whoever is nominated, that process will be extremely productive for the party, just urging action on this issue as the voters are coming around to it themselves.
Your book was, if I may say so successful because I think it got people worried about what could happen in very concrete ways. And so I sat down with Governor Jay Inslee this week and I asked him about that, the challenge of conveying the importance or the significance of something like that carbon dioxide measurement to people who might be inured to it, aren't paying attention to it. How do candidates do a better job of that? Things are bad, they're going to get worse. How do you make people have more urgency than they have at this point?
I think it's about being honest about the science, frankly, and I think that for a long time we didn't really see in the public exactly what the scientists were discovering. But that level of carbon that you mentioned, 415 parts per million, the last time there was that much carbon in the atmosphere, there were palm trees in the Arctic, and the equatorial band of the planet was functionally unlivable for anything like mammal life. Scientists think that 350 parts per million is about a safe level. The pre-industrial average was 280, and we're doing so much damage in so little time. I'm 36 years old. When I was born, it was 340 parts per million, which meant that we had a buffer of 10 parts per million. In those 36 years, we've added 75. We had a buffer of 10, we've added 75. These are the worst years for emissions in the history of humanity, these last 30 years. And an even bigger indictment is that these are years that we knew exactly what we were doing. It was since Al Gore published his first book on warming, it was since the UN established its IPCC, and instead of reducing our emissions, we're still growing them. We don't just need to reduce them, we need to zero them out and ideally get them back down to 350 parts per million, which means, we're moving in the wrong direction. We need to move dramatically in the other direction.
Well, I saw you shaking your head. I mean, what are you looking for? What are you listening for from candidates? Jay Inslee on the one end has this big plan that he's released, $9 trillion plan. Others are talking about it. As you assess or look at candidates going into the election, what do you expect we're going to see from all of them?
Well, first of all, I expect Elizabeth Warren to have a plan for that.
There you go. Well done.
But, obviously we're going to see various shades of how serious we can be. And I'm looking for, again, what we're going to see from that Trump curious 15%. Are they really buying into this climate change thing? Are we going to see, reddish states move towards thinking that this is a real thing? I'm watching Republican voters. Democrats are on board.
Kurt, to that point, I mean, is the economic argument the most compelling one, as you see, when you look at the electorate most broadly?
Yeah, electorally, politically, yeah. And I think that's why when you see like Pete Buttigieg used, I think, a third of his announcement speech to talk about it, but he called it climate security, which is, I think, a great way in terms of vocabulary to talk about this. And I think the second thing, too, is, the reality is a lot of the Republican areas, these are the most hit, devastated areas by extreme climate weather issues. Like, they're seeing it literally in their front yard now. And so I think it takes on a little bit of a different meaning. Even if you don't know what word to call it, you can't deny something is happening. Extreme weather events are happening in your own backyard. And for the president to say, I don't believe it, that's not going to necessarily work in places where they're getting hit by tornadoes and storms.
David, when I was with Jay Inslee in Iowa, we were talking to business owners whose business has been ravaged by flooding from the Mississippi River. Came up in Davenport and ruined a number of stores and restaurants. And they would describe what happens, and then he kind of played an educational role. He drew the line between what they were describing and the climate crisis, as he calls it, more broadly. Are we seeing more of that? Politicians doing a more effective job of drawing that line?
Honestly, I think the weather is doing it for them. We don't have to teach that much. When you see residents of Houston were hit by, 3 500-year storms in 3 years, or the California wildfires, 1.9 million acres last year, the most ever, the year after they had previously set the record. I recently wrote a story about the wildfires in California, and I talked to the mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti. The year he was born, 60,000 acres burned. The year that he was elected mayor in 2013, it was 600,000. When he was reelected, it was 1.2 million. Last year, it was 1.9 million. Anyone who lives in California understands these trajectories. I actually don't think the politicians need to do all that much. What they need to talk about is how they're going to respond to it, how they're going to address it, mitigate, and adapt. And I do think that we're seeing them move very quickly in that direction because the public is moving that way.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.